Hello and welcome to Musings of a Texas Preacher Man. I'm Scott Fisher and I'm glad you've chosen to study with me today. Last week we began a new study entitled The Great Persecution. We're looking at the New Testament text discussing the persecution and crucifixion of Jesus and the subsequent persecution and murder of his first followers. Today we begin with Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, what I call his Kingdom Manifesto. We're not going to do a verse by verse of the entire teaching, but instead we're going to focus on the parts that deal with persecution and the righteous response to it. He begins with 9 statements of blessing found in Matthew chapter 5, verses 3 through 12. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who've been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For in the same way, they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Now, to read this passage without recognizing the context of the persecution his followers would face by the apostate first century Jews is to completely miss his warning and his teaching. His followers were going to face intense persecution at the hands of the first century Jewish leadership and their rejection of Jesus as their promised Messiah. But Jesus' instruction to his disciples is regarding their reaction to that persecution. Matthew chapter 5 is, if you will, it's bookended with specific instructions for his followers on how they're to respond to persecution. In verse 3, he tells his followers that they are not to be spiritually arrogant as their persecutors are. In verse 4, when they mourn, and they will mourn, they'll be comforted. In verse 5, they're to walk in humility, meekly, and the meek will inherit the earth. Now think about that statement. Why would Jesus promise an inheritance of something that's ultimately going to be destroyed, at least per the futurist view of the end of the world? Verse 6, they're to hunger and thirst for righteousness. Verse 7, they're to be merciful. Verse 8, they're to be pure in heart. Verse 9, they're to be peacemakers. As Paul said, so far as it depends upon you, be at peace with all men. And then verse 10, they'll be persecuted for the sake of righteousness. In verse 11, people, and who? What people? People will insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. And then verse 12, when that happens, rejoice and be glad. In the same way, they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So here's the answer of who the persecutors would be. It would be the apostate Jews. Those who rejected Jesus as Messiah would be the ones who persecute his followers. They've always persecuted the prophets of God. In Matthew chapter 23, verse 31, Jesus said to the Jewish leadership, so you testify against yourselves that you're sons of those who murdered the prophets. In Matthew 23, verse 37, he said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together the way a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were unwilling. And in Luke 11:47, he said, woe to you, for you build the tombs of the prophets, and it was your fathers who killed them. And in verse 50, he continued, so that the blood of all the prophets shed since the foundation of the world may be charged against this generation. And then in Luke 13, verses 33 to 34, he said, "Nevertheless, I must journey on today and tomorrow and the next day, for it cannot be that a prophet would perish outside of Jerusalem. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those sent to her." Now, this hatred of Jesus would be transferred to his first followers. But his followers are to respond with humility, meekness, kindness, work for the things that make for peace, be at peace, be a peacemaker. I stated that Matthew 5 is bookended with instructions on how they were to respond to the persecution they would face. In Matthew 5, verses 43 to 45, Jesus gives them the instruction that would be the defining characteristic of his followers. Verse 43, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy.'" Now, this was a popular way of stating this among Jews. Jews being their neighbor, love your neighbor, and Gentiles being your enemy, hate your enemy. But then Jesus flips it, verse 44, "But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who's in heaven." That's a contingent statement. If you don't love your enemies, you can't be a son of the Father. For he causes his sun, S-U-N, to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Now, Luke states this same passage in the following way: "Love your enemies and do good, and lend, expecting nothing in return." And that's really a slap at the system of usury that the Jews perfected in wealth creation. And Jesus is saying, lend, expecting nothing in return. Lend without charging usury, interest. And your reward will be great, and you'll be sons of the Most High. Now look at this. "For he himself," God himself, "is kind to ungrateful and evil men." Now, that verse changed my life. A number of years ago, I was very engaged in the political arena and involved in debates and leading groups and chairing commissions and chairing conventions. And one day the Lord just spoke to me out of this verse. If God himself is kind to ungrateful and evil men, what right do I have to be anything less? And so I've always sought to be kind, even to evil people, even to people I perceive to be evil. Now here's the gist of Jesus' instruction to his first century followers in the Sermon on the Mount. You're going to be persecuted. You're going to be hated by friends, family, neighbors because of me. And when it happens, love them. Don't defend yourself. Don't strike back. Don't use their hatred of me and you as a reason to respond to them in like manner. Walk in kindness, walk in humility, walk in grace and mercy and compassion toward all people, especially those perceived as your enemies. This would be, and I would say this is, the decisive mark of citizens of the kingdom of heaven. And these first century followers, were going to have plenty of opportunity to live it out. Well, I hope you'll continue to join me right here on Musings of a Texas Preacher Man. I post a teaching 4 times each week on Monday through Thursday. I'll post a link on Facebook and Twitter, and if you click the subscribe button in the lower right corner of your screen, and I hope you'll do that, you'll be notified whenever I post a new video. If you like these videos, I hope you'll click the like button and even share it with your friends on social media. Remember, let Scripture interpret Scripture. I hope you'll go out and make today a great day. Be safe, be blessed, and I'll look forward to seeing you right here again tomorrow.